Morning, the sun will rise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope shines on each face. May it bring faith to light our journey on. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of grace it shines on each face. May it bring faith to light our journey on. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of heaven shines on each face. May it bring faith to light our journey on.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Linda Harding. I'm a member of the Worship and Music Committee. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. It's my pleasure to welcome you to worship with the First Parish Plymouth Unitarian Universalist congregation. The first half of our service is recorded and posted on Facebook afterwards. We are also live on the First Parish Plymouth YouTube channel. The portion of the service after the benediction is not recorded, and that's where we join together in community with joys of candle, with joys of concern and candles. We hope that you'll stay afterward, stay online afterward for our virtual coffee hour to connect and participate in stimulating conversation. This month, we're exploring what it means to be a community engaged in the values of acceptance and embrace. Our service today is led by our minister, Reverend Art Lavoie. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever you believe, wherever you are on your life's journey, come walk with us this hour. Our morning service will now begin. And I'd like to start us off with our call to worship with words that are written by Jack Kornfield. The things that matter most in our lives are not fantastic or grand. They are the moments when we touch one another, when we are there in the most attentive and caring way. This simple and profound intimacy is the love that we all long for. These moments of touching and being touched can become a foundation for a path with a heart, and they take place in the most immediate and direct way. Mother Teresa put it like this: in this life, we cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love. Please join in singing with Sandy, sing along with Sandy in hymn number 347, Gather the Spirit. If you don't feel comfortable singing, please speak the words out loud to participate along with her. Thank you.
Gather the Spirit, harvest above.
Good morning, everyone. As I light chalice, please join in saying the words that are printed on your screen. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another.
The first reading is from the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly a sound came from heaven like the rush of a mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them tongues as of fire, distributed and resting on each of one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. The second reading was written by Elizabeth Tarbox, named Rebirth. When the day is too bright or the night too dark, and your feelings are like an avalanche barreling down the mountain of events outside your control, when you look down and you are falling and you cannot see the bottom, or when your pain is eating you and you are nothing but an empty, hungry hole, then there is an opportunity for giving. Don't stay home and cover your head with a pillow. Go outside and plant a tulip bulb in the ground. This is an act of rebirth. Sprinkle breadcrumbs for the squirrels or sunflower seeds for the birds. This is claiming of life. And when you have done that, or if you cannot do that, go stare at a tree whose leaves are letting go for its very survival. Pick a leaf, stare at it. It is life. It is something to teach you. You are as precious as the birds or the tulips or the tree whose crenulated bark protects the insects who seek its shelter. You are an amazing, complex being with poetry in your arteries and charity layered beneath your skin. You have before you a day full of opportunities for living and giving. Do not think you know all there is to know about yourself, for you have not given enough away. You have not given enough away yet to be able to claim self-knowledge. Do you have work to do today? Then do it as if your life were hanging in the balance. Do it as fiercely as if it mattered, for it does. Do you think the world doesn't need you? Think again. You cleanse the world with your breathing. You beautify the world with your giving. You perfect the world with your thinking and acting and caring. Don't stay home and suffocate your sorrow. Go outside and give yourself to the world's asking.
Good morning. Today I'm going to sing Soon the Day Will Arrive. Soon the day will arrive when we will be together and no longer will we live in
wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreams, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and a vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and a promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me.
Good morning. Thank you, Jean and Sandy and Linda and Paul, for everything that you do to make these services work so well. Since mid-March, we've been caught up in the impact of COVID-19. Our lives have been altered completely. Part of our human nature is that we're not as adaptable as we think we are. We like our routines and our plans and our schedules. And we had trouble believing how this was going to unfold. In our self-importance, it was difficult to accept that we could be outdone by this little microscopic virus. Do you remember that at the end of March, the president said that everything would be open and back to normal by Easter? Well, Easter was 7 weeks ago. And it does seem so long ago, but if you think back to the sermon I gave that day, I reminded us that it didn't feel much like a time of rebirth and resurrection, and that we still seemed to be in a cold, dark tomb with the coronavirus all around us. I also said that even though the early Christian tradition had created and embellished many stories about what happened on that day, a magical, supernatural resurrection and rebirth was probably not what the disciples experienced. And even if it was, they still didn't know what to do. They were scared that the Roman troops would arrest them as well. Without Jesus, they certainly didn't feel empowered to carry on his message. The Acts of the Apostles, which is actually a continuation of the Gospel of Luke, chronicles the first several years after Jesus' death. From our reading this morning and other passages, scholars have concluded that Jesus' disciples did not go back to Galilee after his death. They were still in Jerusalem, all in one place, probably the same room that they had rented for their Passover feast a few days before Jesus was executed. 7 weeks after Easter, on a Sunday that we call Pentecost today, they finally had the courage and the vision to go out into the world and continue to proclaim Jesus' message of love and forgiveness. They were filled with the Spirit, filled with a spiritual power and clarity that gave them direction forward. We know, of course, that the disciples' feeling of being empowered and worthy to carry on the teachings of Jesus, their movement back out into the world, was likely to have been a more gradual awakening as they came to terms with Jesus' death and discerned what they were called to do next. Religious literature like the Bible and any great ancient religious teachings, that they're good at creating big cataclysmic and noticeable events to mark specific moments in time. They like creating drama as a way to get people's attention. But our sense of spiritual calling and discernment more often happens over time. As we read the signs of the times, as we reflect on that and our spiritual gifts, and tentatively move forward. Pentecost was already a feast on the Jewish calendar called Shavuot. It was primarily a thanksgiving for the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And it's also known as a holiday to remember the law given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. In religious history, it is typical for an incoming religion that is vying for people's attention. It's typical for this new group to take over existing holidays and give them new meaning. For Easter, the name of the goddess of spring was usurped to create that holiday, and the Christian feast of Christmas replaced a Roman pagan feast celebrated on the same day. And Pentecost now had a new meaning related to the Christian tradition. For the followers of Jesus, this day marks a transition in empowerment, in awareness, and in having the courage of their convictions. The disciples, filled with the Spirit, stand on the balcony and proclaim the good news of the teachings of Jesus. And though there were travelers and pilgrims in Jerusalem from many different places who spoke different languages, each person was able to hear the good news in their own voice. The word gospel means good news. Like the disciples of Jesus, when we preach a gospel, we are announcing and proclaiming good news as we have learned it or discerned it. And because the good news that we are preaching has a spiritual nature, it's not always popular and not often accepted. In order to get to that place of spiritual discernment, we have to listen deeply to the still small voice of the Spirit. And you know, that's not something we're very good at. We kind of like the sound of our own voices. We like to talk and expound so much more than we like to listen. Listening can challenge some of our crazy thoughts and preconceived ideas. When we listen, we have to let go of our self-centeredness and our self-importance. In order to listen, I have to recognize that I'm not the center of the universe. There's a biblical passage about the prophet Elijah, whose life is being threatened, so he hides out in a cave. He is waiting for the voice of God to tell him what to do next. And he stands at the entrance of the cave, and a huge wind comes up, and he doesn't hear God in the wind. And then there's an earthquake, and God's voice isn't in the earthquake either. When Elijah thinks that he has missed hearing what direction he has to take, there is a still small voice ringing in his ear that calls him and tells him what to do. Today, more than ever, we need to listen to the still small voice of the Spirit and not to the cacophony of self-importance and self-delusion that is masking as authority. Listening deeply to the voice of the Spirit leads me to reflect on our Unitarian Universalist principles as a guide in my spiritual discernment. Though there's much we still don't know about the future, we do know more than we did in mid-March or 7 weeks ago on Easter. We have a better sense of how deadly and unpredictable this virus is. We know that it's going to be with us for a long time and that effective treatments and a mass-produced vaccine are still a long way off. We certainly don't know all the answers because our learning and discernment are ongoing, but there are some things we can clearly say. We can stand out on our own balcony today, claim that each and every person is important and needs our care and protection. None of us are truly safe from this virus until all of us are. None of us knows at any time if we are carriers, and we have to act as if we are all carriers in order to protect each other and honor the worth and dignity of all. This virus has made us all aware of the injustices and inequalities in our capitalist and racist system. And we have to proclaim and work towards some kind of new order that really does safeguard the equality of all people. Like the disciples in the Pentecost story, we have to be sure that all can hear the message in their own tongue and in their own voice. We know that this virus is the challenge and the enemy that we now face. And unless we all work together, we will not overcome this challenge. Demonizing one country or another, one people or another, and dishonoring the needs and struggles of people who are immigrant or poor only serves to allow the virus to win. We can proclaim today that our lack of care for the earth has produced cataclysmic natural disasters and will continue the spread of this virus and others like it. We are not in a good relationship with the natural world, and this virus is just another marker of how much we have taken for granted. We can proclaim once again that science and reason are critical to our daily lives and that our decisions need to be informed by something greater than our own emotional drama. If we listen deeply, we can today hear the gratitude of our Mother, the Earth, for a bit of healing that is happening that now that we are all stuck at home. We can proclaim once again that the value of human connection, of family and community is what we need most for our survival all of the time, not just at times of crisis. We will need to restructure our work and economic systems so that people, family, and community are given greater importance. This can be our Pentecost moment and message, my friends. What I'm suggesting, perhaps like the disciples on that Pentecost morning, what I'm suggesting is nothing less than a new world order based on religious principles. This includes many of the things that Jesus taught and that were proclaimed in the story of Pentecost nearly 2 millennia ago. Every great spiritual teacher has come along and said some of the same things. But as usual, we refuse to listen. We co-opt the power of those teachers to serve our own selfish ends. In A Farewell to Arms, Ernest Hemingway writes, "The world breaks everyone, and afterwards many are strong in the broken places, but those that will not break, it kills." Like the disciples after Jesus' death, in this crisis and at other times of crisis, we need to allow ourselves to be broken a bit so that we can be stronger in those broken places. We need to embrace the challenges of the new ways of being that we are now faced with, or else we will be destroyed. But none of us has to face this alone. Even though we can't yet meet in person, we can join with all people of goodwill, all people who choose to listen before they act, no matter who they are or where they come from. As Elizabeth Tarbox tells us in this morning's reading, do you think the world doesn't need you? Think again. You cleanse the world with your breathing. You beautify the world with your giving. You perfect the world with your thinking and acting and caring. Don't stay home and suffocate on your sorrow. Go outside, and I'll add in safe and socially distant ways, and give yourself to the world's asking. Amen, and blessed be. Please join with us in singing "Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire," which is number 34, and the words will be on screen.
Though I may speak with bravest fire,
So you're all not able to see this, but I have been joined in the chapel and on the pulpit this morning by this tiny, tiny little green grasshopper, baby of a thing that's been bouncing around on my hand and on my script all through the sermon. So I just want to say that nature is back and it's out there and it's wonderful. And I want to remind us right now of the words of Mother Teresa that were quoted in the Call to Worship by Jack Kornfield. In this life, we cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love. And now I have a treat for all of you. So if you're watching, if you're not live with us this morning, if you're watching this on YouTube, the recording is going to end shortly, and I invite you to turn to a piece on YouTube called The Great Realization. Realization is spelled with an S rather than a Z because it's British. And it is the piece that I'm going to ask Paul to now put up as our benediction.